Skyscraper tall walls of water once reshaped the continents in just days. These Ice Age megafloods did not just carve canyons, they forged the very ground where human civilization first took root. By the end of this story, you will see the entire map of early history in a startling new light. What if the fertile soils that fed our first cities were a gift from total chaos? And why do ancient cultures everywhere tell stories of a great deluge? How much of your own world was built by forces of unimaginable destruction? That frozen planet was a pressure cooker, and its lid was about to blow off. Picture a world where sea levels were so low you could walk from Siberia to Alaska on dry land, a vast expanse now submerged beneath the Bering Sea. This was the Pleistocene epoch, a time of giants like mammoths and saber-toothed cats, all living under the shadow of colossal ice sheets. These glaciers were not just blankets of snow, they were slow-moving rivers of ice, so unimaginably heavy they pressed the very crust of the earth downward. And they held a secret, one with devastating consequences. Locked within and behind these mountains of ice were vast reservoirs of meltwater. The most famous of these was Glacial Lake Missoula, an inland sea held in place by a single, fragile dam of ice in what is now the state of Idaho. This lake contained more water than two of the modern Great Lakes combined. The stability of this entire world was a delicate illusion, a temporary balance between the immense weight of the ice and the even greater power of the water it imprisoned. All it would take was one weak point, one fracture in that icy dam for that balance to shatter forever. That fragile dam of ice could not hold forever. The pressure from the immense lake behind it was simply too great. As the climate continued its slow, inexorable warming, the ice began to thin from above and below. Meltwater seeped into its fractures, and the deep, heavy water of the lake began to exert a force known as buoyancy. This is the same principle that makes an ice cube float in your glass. The water was literally trying to lift the entire ice dam, a plug of ice hundreds of meters thick, right off the ground. This created a ticking clock. Eventually, the stress would become too much, and the dam would fail not with a slow leak, but with a sudden, explosive rupture. The entire ice wall would shatter in a matter of hours, unleashing a nightmare. The collapse of the Glacial Lake Missoula ice dam was not a one-time event. Geological evidence written in the scarred landscape of the American Northwest tells us this happened dozens of times. Each rupture released a cataclysm. Picture a wall of water and ice, hundreds of meters high, moving at highway speeds. The flow rate in those first few hours was staggering, equivalent to 10 times the combined flow of every single river in the world today. This was not a river, it was a continent scouring event. The water did not simply flow over the land, it peeled it back, ripping up the bedrock and carving out hundreds of cubic miles of earth in just a few days. This reveals a fundamental truth about our planet's history. The most dramatic changes to its surface were not always the work of slow, patient erosion. Sometimes the world was remade in a series of violent, explosive bursts. The sheer power of these floods is almost impossible to comprehend, but we can see its brutal signature etched into the land itself. The scars of this chaos are still visible today across the channeled scablands of eastern Washington. This vast, barren landscape of dry waterfalls and empty canyons is the direct result of that explosive release. When the ice dam shattered, a wall of water nearly 2,000 feet high, taller than the Empire State Building, raced across the land at 65 miles per hour. It was not a gentle flow but a terrestrial tsunami, a grinding slurry of ice, rock, and debris that acted like liquid sandpaper on an epic scale. It stripped away hundreds of feet of topsoil, carving out deep channels like the Grand Coulee in just a few days. The force was so immense it plucked house-sized boulders from the underlying bedrock and carried them for miles like pebbles, depositing them in strange, isolated clusters. And this was not a one-time catastrophe. The ice dam would slowly reform, the lake would fill once more, and the entire cycle would repeat dozens of times over centuries. The energy released in just one of these events surpassed the combined force of thousands of nuclear bombs, permanently altering the geography of an entire region the size of West Virginia. This raw geologic power did not just reshape North America. The sheer volume of fresh water and ice dumped into the oceans sent ripples across the global climate, shifting weather patterns and sea levels in ways that would soon create new opportunities for human pioneers. The devastation in North America was just one act in a planetary drama. All across the globe, as the great ice sheets bled their meltwater, similar cataclysms were unfolding. The Altai Mountains of Siberia, for instance, hold their own silent testimony to these megafloods. There, colossal lakes held back by ice dams also ruptured, sending walls of water crashing through mountain valleys with enough force to leave giant ripple marks, like the ones you see on a stream bed, but scaled up to the size of office buildings. Meanwhile, in the heart of Central Asia, an even larger system of proglacial lakes, vast bodies of water pooled at the edges of the ice sheets, underwent their own catastrophic drainages. The sudden release of this unimaginable volume of fresh water into the Arctic Ocean would have been like throwing a massive switch in the planet's climate machine. It disrupted the great ocean conveyor belts, the currents that regulate global temperatures, sending shockwaves through weather patterns worldwide, and the chaos reached Europe too. The Baltic region was once home to a massive body of water known as the Baltic Ice Lake, trapped against a retreating glacier. When that glacial dam finally gave way, it unleashed a deluge into the North Sea so powerful it reconfigured the entire coastline of Scandinavia in a geological instant. This was not a series of isolated accidents. It was a synchronized global unraveling. A warming planet was purging itself of its icy burden, and the method was one of violent, spectacular release. These interconnected floods did more than just reshape coastlines and carve mountains. They fundamentally altered the very conditions for life on Earth, creating unexpected opportunities in their wake. The stage was now set for humanity's greatest transformation, a revolution born from the fertile mud left behind by the retreating chaos. This global deluge of meltwater did more than just carve canyons and shift coastlines. It left behind a gift of almost unimaginable value. As the turbulent waters finally receded, they deposited a thick, uniform blanket of finely ground rock and mineral dust, a substance geologists call rock flour. This was not ordinary dirt. It was a supercharged soil, pulverized by the immense force of the ice and floods into particles so fine they could hold water and nutrients with incredible efficiency. This powder was packed with essential elements like potassium and phosphorus, the very building blocks of robust plant growth. The floods had effectively tilled and fertilized entire continents on a scale no human effort could ever match. They wiped the ecological slate clean, stripping away old, depleted soils and replacing them with a pristine, nutrient-rich blank canvas. In regions like the Near East, along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, these deep layers of flood-deposited silt created the famous Fertile Crescent. In China, powerful winds picked up this fine sediment and deposited it over vast areas, forming the deep, fertile Loess plateaus that would become the heartland of Chinese agriculture. These were not just new landscapes, they were the world's first and most productive farmlands, ready and waiting. For the hunter-gatherers who witnessed this transformation, the message was clear. The most unpredictable and terrifying force of nature had, in its aftermath, offered them a permanent invitation to stay. This incredible fertility was not an accident of nature, but a direct inheritance from the ice. The term Fertile Crescent brings to mind a land of natural abundance, but its legendary productivity was largely a gift from those ancient floods. For centuries, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, their flows swollen by meltwater from distant, ice-capped mountains, repeatedly overflowed their banks. Each flood was a delivery of life itself, spreading layers of fine, mineral-rich silt across the plains of Mesopotamia. This sediment, known as alluvium, was the perfect growing medium. Its tiny particles acted like sponges, holding onto precious water through long dry seasons, while simultaneously releasing a slow, steady supply of nutrients like phosphorus and potassium directly to the roots of crops. This process created a self-renewing garden. Farmers could grow barley and wheat year after year, even millennium after millennium, without the soil becoming exhausted, because the river kept bringing new fertility downstream. A similar story unfolded along the Nile. The delta's legendary black soil, so rich it seemed to bubble with life, was built from sediments washed down from the volcanic highlands of Ethiopia. This process was supercharged by the increased rainfall and runoff following the glacial retreat. The annual inundation of the Nile was a gentler, more predictable echo of the ancient megafloods, a seasonal rhythm that systematically fertilized the land and allowed Egyptian civilization to flourish for thousands of years without ever needing to rotate their crops. The first farmers did not simply stumble upon fertile land. They settled on a foundation that had been meticulously, if violently, prepared for them. The very ground beneath their feet was the final, peaceful gift from an age of unimaginable chaos. This prepared landscape did more than just feed people. It demanded a new way of living. The flat, open plains of Mesopotamia, meticulously smoothed by countless floods, presented an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time, vast stretches of land could be watered with simple canals, drawing from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, but this gift came with a monumental challenge. The rivers were unpredictable, their flows dictated by distant mountain snowmelt. One season could bring a drought that withered crops, the next a deluge that washed entire fields away. To survive, let alone thrive, required a level of coordination never before attempted. Someone had to organize the digging of massive irrigation channels. Someone had to decide how to distribute the water fairly. Someone had to store surplus grain for the lean years. This was the crucible that forged civilization itself. The need for large-scale, coordinated agriculture created the need for leaders, for administrators, for rules. It spurred the invention of writing, not for poetry, but for accounting, to track grain stores and labor dues. The very first cities, like Uruk and did not rise randomly. They emerged exactly where the floodplains were widest and the soil richest, becoming the nerve centers for this new social order. The constant, grinding work of managing water and food required a hierarchy, a centralized authority that could command thousands of people. So the legacy of those ancient Ice Age floods was far more than just dirt. It was the very template for society, a set of problems so vast that solving them forced humanity to invent the city, the state, and the written word. The blueprint for our modern world was drawn in the wet, fertile mud left behind by a retreating ice sheet. The blueprint for civilization was not just drawn in the mud of Mesopotamia. Far to the west, another river was building a kingdom of unparalleled endurance. Egypt is a ribbon of green life stretched across a vast desert, a land where rain almost never falls. Its entire existence hinged on the Nile, but the Nile's own behavior was a gift from the retreating ice. The river's twin sources worked in perfect harmony. From the Great Lakes of Central Africa, the White Nile provided a steady, reliable flow, its waters buffered by massive wetlands. Meanwhile, the Blue Nile descended from the volcanic highlands of Ethiopia, carrying a precious cargo of dark, mineral-rich silt. This erosion was supercharged by the new climate patterns established after the glaciers melted, increasing the rainfall that scoured those highland rocks. Each summer, the Nile would swell and spill over its banks, not with destructive fury, but with a gentle, predictable inundation. It deposited that Ethiopian silt across the floodplain, layer after layer, year after year. This created the stark division that defined ancient Egypt. They called it the Black Land, the fertile strip of soil so dark and rich it seemed to breathe with life, surrounded completely by the Red Land, the barren and deadly desert. This predictable cycle of renewal was the cornerstone of Egyptian civilization. While Mesopotamia faced chaotic and unpredictable floods, the Nile's rhythm was as reliable as the sunrise. That reliability allowed for a society that could plan not just for the next season, but for the next century. It fostered a culture of stability and continuity that lasted for 3,000 years, a span of time almost impossible for us to comprehend. The pyramids, the temples, the entire reign of the pharaohs all rested upon a foundation of silt that was itself the final gift of a dying ice age. This pattern of fertile, flood-scoured land was not unique to the Middle East. On the other side of the world, another great civilization was rising from the same chaotic origins, in a valley shadowed by the Himalayas. While the Nile offered predictable rhythms, the Indus River presented a far more volatile partner. Fed by the colossal glaciers of the Himalayas and supercharged by the intense monsoon rains that followed the Ice Age, this river system was a powerhouse of both creation and destruction. It carried unimaginable amounts of silt, washing down from the youngest, most rapidly rising mountains on Earth to build the vast, fertile plains of the Indus Valley. It was upon this dynamic, unpredictable foundation that one of the ancient world's most enigmatic and widespread civilizations emerged. The Harappan people did not simply live beside the river, they learned to negotiate with it. Their entire society was an exercise in sophisticated water management. Look at the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, a city built on massive, man-made platforms of earth and mud brick, raised high above the floodplain. Every single house was connected to an elaborate, covered drainage system that would put many modern cities to shame. They constructed vast reservoirs to capture precious monsoon rain and a network of canals to distribute water to their fields. This was not a people who feared water, but one who respected its dual nature. They harnessed its life-giving silt to grow enormous surpluses of wheat and barley, enough to support populations of tens of thousands in their sprawling, meticulously planned urban centers. Yet they always built with an escape plan, designing their cities to survive the river's inevitable destructive surges. The Indus Valley civilization, in its brilliant engineering and orderly streets, stands as a monument to humanity's ability to build a stable world upon the most unstable of foundations, a legacy written in water and stone. The color of the river itself tells the story. The Yellow River runs thick with the very soil that built China. Its legendary hue comes from the immense deposits of loess, a fine, yellow silt that forms the vast plateau at the heart of its basin. This was not just any dirt, it was a gift from the sky carried by powerful winds from the Gobi Desert and other arid lands. During the cold, dry peaks of the Ice Age, with less vegetation to hold the earth in place, these winds scoured the landscape, lifting unimaginable volumes of this mineral-rich dust into the atmosphere. When the climate shifted, the winds died down, and this suspended earth settled, blanketing an area the size of France in a layer of silt hundreds of meters thick. This created a landscape unique in all the world, a plateau of soft, porous soil that was both a blessing and a profound challenge. The loess was incredibly fertile, perfect for the early cultivation of millet. It was also soft enough to be worked with simple wooden tools, allowing early farmers to clear land and dig dwellings with ease, yet this same softness made it vulnerable. When the great river, swollen with meltwater from the retreating ice, overflowed its banks, it would carve into the lowest plateau with terrifying speed, reshaping the land and depositing that fertile yellow earth across its floodplain in a constant, chaotic cycle of destruction and renewal. It was on this dynamic, yellow foundation that the foundational myths of Chinese culture took root. The very concept of the mandate of heaven, the idea that a ruler's right to govern was granted by the divine forces of order, may well have sprung from the need to understand and control these unpredictable waters. The Shang dynasty, with its advanced bronze work and early writing, rose directly from the agricultural surplus made possible by the yellow earth. Their entire world, from the food they ate to the very color of their landscape, was a direct inheritance from the atmospheric turmoil of a world emerging from ice. One of the most compelling bridges between geology and mythology lies beneath the waves of the Black Sea. Around 7,600 years ago, this body of water was a very different place, a vast freshwater lake lying hundreds of feet below the level of the rising global oceans. Its only connection to the outside world was a narrow, natural dam of land where the Bosporus Strait is today. As the immense glaciers of the north continued to melt, the world's oceans swelled, lifting the Mediterranean Sea higher and higher, pressing against this fragile land bridge. Then the dam broke, the Mediterranean waters burst through in a thunderous cascade, a waterfall 200 times more powerful than Niagara Falls that raged for months, perhaps even years. Every single day, 10 cubic miles of saltwater poured into the low-lying basin, rapidly swallowing the ancient shoreline. The lake's surface rose as much as 6 inches per day, drowning over 60,000 square miles of land in a single human lifetime. For the early farming communities living along that fertile lakeshore, this was not a slow, creeping change. It was an apocalypse unfolding before their eyes, an unstoppable wall of water devouring their fields, their homes, and their entire world. The trauma of such an event would have been unforgettable, a story seared into the memory of every survivor. As those displaced populations scattered across Europe and the Near East, they carried this story with them. Could this be the geological seed from which the great flood myths grew? The story of Noah, the epic of Gilgamesh, and countless other deluge legends all share a common core, a world drowned by divine judgment and a lucky few who escaped. The scientific debate over the Black Sea Deluge is fierce, with some researchers arguing the flooding was more gradual. But the power of the hypothesis is not in its precise timeline. It is in its profound suggestion that our oldest stories might be literal memories, passed down for hundreds of generations, echoing a time when the very ground of human civilization was shaped and then submerged by the chaotic aftermath of the ice. These stories are too widespread and too similar to be mere coincidence. A world-destroying flood, a chosen family or group saved by building a boat or finding high ground, and a divine promise or a new world emerging from the waters. This narrative appears in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical story of Noah in Hindu scriptures, and in the indigenous traditions of the Americas and Australia. The sheer universality points to a shared global experience. For our ancestors living through the end of the Ice Age, the rising waters were not a theory, but a terrifying, inescapable reality. Over centuries, they watched the seas advance, swallowing the very land beneath their feet. Coastlines retreated for miles. Generations of familiar hunting grounds and sacred sites disappeared forever beneath the waves. The North Sea, for instance, was once a vast, inhabited plain known as Doggerland, a fertile landscape that connected Britain to mainland Europe. For thousands of years, people lived and hunted there. Then the water came, slowly at first, and then in a final, catastrophic rush. Around 6,100 years ago, a massive submarine landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a tsunami that sent a towering wave crashing across the remaining Doggerland hills. This was not a slow, creeping flood. It was a sudden, violent wall of water that would have erased entire communities in a single, horrifying day. The psychological impact of such an event is almost unimaginable. It would have been a trauma seared into the collective memory of the survivors, a story told and retold with fear and awe around campfires for hundreds of years. The details might have blurred, the gods and heroes added, but the core truth remained. A great flood had once cleansed the world. These myths, then, may be far more than simple allegories. They could be the deeply encoded geological memories of our species, a fossilized record of humanity's most vulnerable moment, when we stood witness to the planet's last great act of violent rebirth. These floods were both destroyer and creator, a paradox of unimaginable power. In their immediate wake, they left only a scoured wasteland, a world stripped down to bare rock. Entire ecosystems were erased in a matter of days, the land rendered sterile and lifeless. Yet, this act of total destruction was the necessary prelude to creation. The very same floods that carved the barren-channeled scablands also deposited the deep, fertile soils of the Palaus region. This rich, wind-blown silt loam, famous for its wheat production, was literally born from the pulverized rock and sediment that the floodwaters carried and then gently laid down in their final, exhausted stages. The floods acted as a planetary-scale farmer, tilling the earth on a continental level. They ripped away old, weathered, and nutrient-poor soils, exposing the fresh minerals beneath or blanketing entire regions with new, life-giving earth. For the first bands of humans exploring this reshaped world, the most promising places to stop and settle were not the ancient, stable landscapes. They were the newest lands, the recently flooded valleys and plains that glowed with mineral richness. The soil was soft, easy to work with simple tools, and bursting with the nutrients that would lead to stronger, more abundant crops. This is the central, haunting truth of our beginnings. The greatest flourishing of human culture was made possible by the same cataclysmic forces that could, in an instant, wipe the slate completely clean. That volatile landscape demanded a new kind of human genius. Faced with the legacy of floods and the absolute necessity of river water, the first civilizations transformed themselves into master hydrologists. In Mesopotamia, the challenge was immense. The Tigris and Euphrates did not flood with the gentle, predictable rhythm of the Nile. Their surges were violent and unpredictable, capable of washing away an entire season's crops in a single destructive burst. The solution was a breathtaking feat of collective labor, a web of human ingenuity laid over the fertile land. They dug vast, branching networks of canals to divert water to distant fields. They constructed strong dikes or earthen walls to hold back the rivers during their most furious moods, and they built reservoirs to capture and store precious water for the long, dry months. This was not merely irrigation. It was a complete re-engineering of the environment, turning a volatile, dangerous landscape into a reliable breadbasket capable of feeding millions. This system required constant maintenance and a clear chain of command. further cementing the power of priests and kings who could organize such vast projects. The very first written records from this region are not epic poems or royal decrees. They are administrative documents, lists of grain rations for laborers, and accounts of canal digging projects. Civilization, it seems, was built on bureaucracy born from the need to control water. On the other side of the world, another society approached the same problem with a different, yet equally brilliant strategy. The Indus Valley civilization designed the world's first sophisticated urban sanitation systems. In cities like Mohenjo-Daro, every single house was equipped with a bathroom and a drainage outlet. These outlets connected to a city-wide network of covered, brick-lined drains that ran beneath the streets, complete with manholes for maintenance. They built elaborate water chutes to manage runoff and vast wells to provide clean drinking water. This was a society that did not just try to control water for agriculture. They integrated water management into the very fabric of their daily urban life, creating a standard of public health that would not be seen again for thousands of years. Their entire city was a machine for living, designed in harmony with the vital and often destructive flow of water. In China, this struggle against water was woven directly into the foundation of their cultural identity. Legendary stories tell of a great hero, Yu the Great, who was celebrated not for winning battles but for taming the floods. The legend says that Yu spent 13 years dredging clogged rivers and digging new canals to give the unruly waters a proper path to the sea. His hands were calloused, his body was weathered, and he was so dedicated that he passed by his own house 3 times without ever stopping to go inside. For this monumental effort, he was said to have earned the mandate of heaven and founded the Xia dynasty, the first in Chinese history. This myth is profoundly revealing. It shows that the ultimate virtue, the very qualification for leadership in early China, was the demonstrated ability to manage water. This was not just a fight against nature. It was a sophisticated, hard-won collaboration with the hydrological cycle, the monumental challenge of managing water, a challenge presented directly by the post-glacial world, spurred the very innovations in technology, engineering, and social organization that we now call civilization. The echoes of the Ice Age are not confined to deep time. A mere 7 centuries ago, the world was gripped by a climatic shudder known as the Little Ice Age. From around 1300 to 1850, global temperatures dipped, glaciers in the Alps advanced relentlessly, swallowing entire farms, and growing seasons across Europe and Asia grew shorter and more unreliable. This was not a return to a full glacial world, but a potent reminder of our planet's inherent volatility. The consequences were written in hunger and rebellion. Widespread crop failures led to famines that killed millions. The price of grain skyrocketed, triggering bread riots and social unrest that toppled governments. In the frozen canals of the Netherlands, painters captured the harsh beauty of the frost fairs, while just outside the frame, people starved. This period serves as a stark, more recent miniature of the environmental pressures that have always tested human societies. Yet there is a crucial and telling difference. The civilizations emerging at the end of the last ice age were adapting to a world that was generally warming, a world where new, fertile lands were being unveiled from beneath the ice. They faced chaos, but it was a chaos that ultimately offered more resources, not less. Their challenge was to harness a newfound abundance. In contrast, the societies of the Little Ice Age were grappling with a world that was closing in on them, a world of shrinking harvests and advancing cold. Their challenge was one of pure survival against escalating scarcity. This stark contrast reveals a fundamental truth about humanity's relationship with the climate. It is not merely the fact of change that defines our fate, but its direction and its speed. a slow warming could be an invitation to innovate and expand. A rapid cooling could be a death sentence, and the outcome hinges entirely on the technological and social tools a society has at its disposal. The same shift that spells opportunity for one can mean collapse for another. This historical lesson resonates with a profound urgency today as we face a climatic shift of our own making, one whose speed is unprecedented in human history. The silent stones themselves tell the story. If you know the language, to understand these ancient cataclysms, you must become a geological detective, reading the clues left behind in a landscape that, to the untrained eye, might just look like a barren wasteland. Take the giant ripple marks found in places like Commerce Prairie, Montana. These are not the delicate ripples you see on a sandy beach. They are colossal waves of earth, some standing 30 feet high and spaced hundreds of feet apart. For generations, people simply saw them as strange, rolling hills, but to a geologist, they are the fossilized signature of a torrent. They formed on the bottom of a raging current, a flow so deep and powerful that it sculpted the very ground into these monumental undulations. Then there are the erratic boulders, lonely sentinels perched in the middle of flat plains, far from any mountain range. These house-sized rocks are geological orphans, carried on icebergs that calved into the floodwaters and then melted, dropping their heavy cargo hundreds of miles from home. The most dramatic evidence, however, is written in negative space. Look at Dry Falls in Washington state. Today, it is a stark, silent cliff face nearly 400 feet high, 3 times the width of Niagara Falls, standing completely dry. This is not a feature that was slowly carved by a small, patient river. This is a place where a waterfall of unimaginable power once thundered, a cataract that plunged over the edge as a continent-scouring flood ripped its way downhill. The entire channeled scablands are a network of these dry canyons and abandoned channels, a landscape sculpted by a hydrological event that makes the Amazon River look like a quiet stream. How do we know when this happened? Scientists drill down into the layers of sediment, reading the strata like pages in a book. They find deposits from the floods themselves, layers of chaotic boulders and coarse gravel, sandwiched between quieter layers of silt and volcanic ash. By using radiocarbon dating on bits of ancient wood or charcoal trapped within these layers, they can assign dates to the chaos. This painstaking detective work reveals that the landscape we see as permanent and solid is in fact a snapshot of a single, violent moment in an ongoing planetary drama. The story of the Earth is not one of slow, steady change, but of quiet periods punctuated by episodes of breathtaking, creative violence. This relentless pressure forged new ways of thinking. When the world you know is swept away in a torrent, survival demands more than just resilience, it demands invention. The chaos of the floods and the subsequent scramble to control the new landscapes presented a series of brutal, non-negotiable problems. Entire coastlines vanished, forcing migrations into unfamiliar territories. River systems shifted course without warning, turning reliable water sources into dry gullies or raging torrents. The very ground beneath their feet was new and unpredictable. In this crucible of constant change, the old ways were not enough. Simple hunting and gathering could not guarantee survival when the herds were displaced and the foraging grounds were buried under silt. The challenge was not merely to endure the catastrophe, but to master the strange new world it left behind. This was the great engine of early innovation. The need to grow food reliably in these fresh, fertile soils spurred breakthroughs in agricultural technology, from the development of the ard, a simple plow, to the selective breeding of hardier grains. The necessity of storing surplus grain against future droughts or floods led to the invention of sophisticated pottery and granaries. every aspect of life demanded a new solution, a smarter way of doing things. The human mind was being pushed to its limits, and in that pressure, it learned to build, to organize, and to predict. The most profound innovations, however, were not just in tools but in thought itself. How do you know when the river will flood? You look to the stars, the desperate need to anticipate the seasons, to predict the life-giving and destructive surges of rivers like the Nile and the Tigris, became a powerful driver for early astronomy. Tracking the cyclical movements of the sun, moon, and stars was not an abstract philosophical pursuit. It was a matter of survival. It allowed for the creation of the first calendars, turning the chaotic flow of time into a predictable rhythm of planting, growing, and harvesting. This was humanity's first great step toward mastering its environment through knowledge, a direct intellectual response to an unpredictable world. And with this new collective knowledge came a new social challenge. How do you fairly divide a river's water among thousands of farms? You cannot. The management of such a vital, shared resource required something unprecedented, a system of laws and a structure of governance. The need to organize the digging of massive canals and the maintenance of dikes created the first bureaucracies. It demanded leaders who could plan on a scale never before imagined, and it required written records to track labor, rations, and land rights. In this light, civilization itself emerges not as a slow, inevitable climb, but as a rapid, creative explosion. It was a brilliant, collective response to a world remade by water and ice. The floods did not just carve canyons and deposit rich soil. They forced a fundamental reshaping of the human mind, pushing us to collaborate, to innovate, and to build the very foundations of the modern world. Such dramatic stories inevitably attract grander, more mysterious explanations. You might have heard theories linking these ancient floods to the lost city of Atlantis, or claiming they were triggered by a rogue comet striking the Earth. While these ideas make for compelling fantasy, the geological record tells a different, and in many ways more incredible, story. The evidence for these floods is not hidden in cryptic ancient texts, but written plainly across the American Northwest in the language of giant ripple marks and dry waterfalls. Decades of meticulous field research have built an overwhelming consensus. The primary trigger was the mechanical failure of ice dams holding back colossal proglacial lakes. This was a purely terrestrial drama, a consequence of the Earth's own climate cycles and the immense physical forces contained within its ice sheets. The timeline itself debunks the more sensational claims. The Great Missoula floods scoured the channeled Scablands roughly 15,000 years ago. The first Sumerian city-states, the very birthplaces of civilization, did not rise until about 6,000 years ago. That is a gap of 9,000 years, an almost unimaginable span of time. The connection is not one of direct, immediate causation. It is a slower, more profound chain of environmental cause and effect. The floods were a critical, violent first act that prepared the stage, depositing the fertile soils and creating the stable climatic conditions that, millennia later, would allow the first farmers to settle down and build a new world. The real story is not about a single civilization-ending catastrophe, but about a planet resetting its own stage for a revolution. The planet did not merely heal after the floods, it reinvented itself. In the scarred and scoured landscapes, water began to collect in the countless depressions carved into the bare basalt bedrock. These became the pothole lakes of the channeled Scablands, a constellation of blue jewels scattered across a desert of stone. Each one became a self-contained world, a vital oasis for migrating waterfowl, a breeding ground for amphibians, and a watering hole for herds of elk and deer. These were not the only new habitats, where the floodwaters finally slowed and deposited their immense loads of sediment. they built lands of legendary fertility. The Willamette Valley in Oregon is one such place, a vast basin filled with silt hundreds of feet deep. This created an ecosystem of almost explosive productivity, a temperate rainforest of towering conifers and rich bottomlands that supported an unparalleled density of life. The ecological reshuffling was even more profound. The floods acted as a continental plumber, rerouting entire river systems. Some rivers were pirated, their flows suddenly diverted into new channels. Others, like the Columbia, were massively enlarged, becoming the dominant arteries of a new watershed. This was not a gentle evolution, it was a sudden and dramatic deal of new ecological cards. Species that had been separated for millennia were now connected by new water corridors. Others found their ancient homelands severed, forced to adapt or perish. For a generalist, omnivorous species like ours, this ecological turmoil was not a threat, but an unprecedented buffet of new opportunities. The new river valleys offered predictable migration routes for game. The fertile soils allowed for the growth of nutrient-rich plants and dense stands of nut-bearing trees. The very chaos of the floods had created a patchwork of new niches, and our ancestors were among the most successful pioneers to move in. The world after the ice was not just a changed map, it was a living, breathing planet offering a second chance, and we were ready to take it. The land itself became a guide. After the floodwaters receded, they left behind more than just fertile soil. They created a network of highways carved directly into the earth. These newly sculpted floodscapes, with their deep valleys and scoured channels, offered paths of least resistance through mountain ranges and across barren plateaus that would have been nearly impossible to cross otherwise. Imagine a band of early hunters moving through a world still raw from the recent cataclysms. Before them, a wall of jagged hills and tangled forests blocks the way. But to the side, a wide, U-shaped valley, freshly carved by a torrent of water and ice, cuts a clean, straight path through the obstacle. The floor of this valley is flat, the terrain is open, and it is lined with fresh water sources and the new vegetation that attracts game. This was not a gentle trail, it was a superhighway built by geological violence. The most dramatic example of this may lie in the story of the first Americans. For generations, the dominant theory held that people followed the coast, but another route may have been forged by the floods. As the great continental ice sheets retreated, they revealed a narrow, ice-free corridor along the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. This passage was likely opened and cleared by the catastrophic draining of a colossal proglacial lake known as Lake Agassiz. When this vast inland sea suddenly emptied, it would have scoured the land down to bedrock, removing the glacial debris and creating a viable, if stark, pathway south. The very event that seemed like an apocalypse may have, in fact, paved the way for the peopling of two entire continents. In Eurasia, the story was different but just as compelling. The immense wind-blown silt deposits, the lowest plateaus, created vast, open grasslands. These were not cramped forests or rugged mountains, but sweeping, park-like plains where hunters could see for miles. Game animals like mammoth, bison, and wild horses thrived on the rich new grasses, and human groups could follow these herds across landscapes that were suddenly easy to traverse and bursting with life. The floods did not just create destinations for humanity, they drew the very maps we use to explore a reborn world. The deepest truths of this story are not written in stone, but in mud. To read them, scientists become time travelers, lowering hollow drills into the still waters of ancient lakebeds and peat bogs. They pull up long, slender cylinders of sediment, a layered archive of everything that has settled on that spot for thousands of years. Within these muddy cores, the moment of a megaflood is unmistakable, a layer of fine silt laid down during centuries of calm. is abruptly torn apart by a thick band of chaotic gravel and coarse sand, a violent signature left by a single catastrophic event. But the real story of change is told by something much smaller, something almost invisible. Trapped within the mud are countless ancient pollen grains, each one a tiny, indestructible time capsule from a long-vanished plant. These grains are the silent witnesses. In the layer just before the flood, the pollen might tell a story of a dense pine forest. Then, in the sediment laid down immediately after the cataclysm, that pine pollen vanishes. It is replaced almost overnight in geological terms by the pollen of sagebrush and prairie grasses. This is the ecological truth of the floods. They did not just drown the land, they scoured it clean, wiping out entire established ecosystems and creating a blank slate. A forest that had stood for millennia was gone, replaced by an open, sun-drenched savanna. In other places, the floods did the opposite, damming valleys with debris to create vast new wetlands and marshes where none had existed before. This pollen record is our window into the world the first human farmers would have encountered. They were not exploring a pristine, ancient wilderness. They were walking into a young, dynamic, and incredibly fertile landscape, a world still recovering from a trauma that had, in its aftermath, prepared the perfect ground for a revolution. These stories, when laid side by side, read like variations on a single, terrifying memory. A divine power, displeased with humanity, decides to wipe the slate clean with a global deluge. But one righteous man receives a warning. He builds a great vessel, saving his family and the seeds of all life. The waters rise, destroying the old world, and when they recede, this chosen family steps out onto fresh mud to begin the human story anew. This is the plot of the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Utnapishtim is commanded by the god E to build a boat. It is the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible, instructed by God to construct his ark. It echoes in the Greek legend of Deucalion, who survived the flood sent by Zeus, and in the Hindu scriptures, where the sage Manu is warned by a fish to build a ship. The core narrative is unmistakably the same, yet the differences are where culture speaks loudest. In the Chinese version, the hero Yu the Great does not escape the flood in a boat. His story is one of confrontation and control. He spends 13 years dredging rivers and digging canals, physically taming the chaotic waters to make the land safe for people. His virtue is not in his obedience to build an ark, but in his brilliant, persistent engineering. This single difference is profoundly revealing. It reflects a civilization whose primary historical struggle was not with a single, sudden deluge, but with the constant, monumental challenge of managing the unpredictable Yellow River. Their foundational myth is not about escape, but about mastery. This comparative analysis points to a powerful conclusion. A shared, traumatic experience of rising waters and catastrophic flooding at the end of the Ice Age likely provided the raw geological seed for these stories. But each culture planted that seed in the soil of its own unique experience. For societies in Mesopotamia and the Levant, where flash floods could descend from arid mountains with shocking speed, the story became one of sudden divine judgment and miraculous survival. For the Chinese, whose very identity was forged in a millennia-long battle to control the river's flow, the story evolved into a celebration of human ingenuity and bureaucratic order. The universal flood myth is not a single story passed from one people to another. It is a chorus of independent voices, all singing about the same profound trauma, but each in the key of its own landscape and its own hard-won relationship with water. Our world is still cradled in the bowl carved by those ancient floods. The very bread baskets that feed nations owe their existence to that violent past. The deep, black soils of the American Midwest, the wheat fields of Ukraine, and the endless agricultural plains of northern China are all underlain by a foundation of glacial till and wind-blown loess, the literal dust of the Ice Age. These are not just fertile lands, they are geological gifts, the direct legacy of pulverized rock and flood-deposited silt. Our largest cities, too, are rooted in this history. Megacities like Shanghai, Cairo, and New Orleans are built on vast deltas, the accumulated mud and sand that ancient rivers, supercharged with glacial melt, carried to the sea over thousands of years. We did not randomly choose these locations. We were drawn to the same fertile grounds that our ancestors were, the lands made rich by the same cataclysms. This deep history is far more than a story for textbooks. It is a living reality with profound implications for our survival today. Recognizing that our most productive farmlands are a finite, non-renewable geologic resource compels us to protect them from erosion and degradation. Understanding that our great coastal cities are built on young, unstable sediments helps us plan for rising sea levels and the increasing threat of subsidence. The same forces of water and ice that shaped our world are still at work, grinding down mountains and raising new land, just on a timescale too slow for us to easily perceive. Our civilization rests upon an inheritance we did not create and cannot easily replace. As we enter a new era of rapid climate change, with its own promise of rising waters and shifting weather patterns, this long view becomes our most essential guide. The choices we make today about how to live on this flood-shaped planet will determine whether this ancient gift becomes our foundation or our epitaph. The story of the Ice Age floods is a testament to a powerful paradox. Our earliest civilizations did not emerge in spite of cataclysm, but directly because of it. They stood on the shoulders of a shattered world, taking its raw materials, the deep fertile silt, the scoured and open plains, the mighty but manageable rivers, and laying the first stones of our modern existence. Those floods were a geological crucible, a trial by water that tested and ultimately transformed humanity. It forged in our ancestors a new kind of resilience, one built not on mere survival, but on the ability to see opportunity in the wake of total chaos. This history speaks directly to our own moment of profound environmental change. It offers a crucial perspective, reminding us that challenge has always been the mother of invention. Periods of great upheaval, while terrifying and destructive, can also clear the ground for even greater renewal. The true legacy of those ancient floods is not just the soil beneath our feet or the shape of our continents. It is the enduring spirit of adaptation they ignited within us, a capacity to innovate and rebuild that is woven into the very fabric of human history. Look closer at the landscape around you, at the river valleys and fertile plains. Their story is your story. We would love to hear your thoughts on how our deep past continues to shape our future in the comments below. If this journey through deep time has reshaped your view of our foundations, please support this channel with a like and subscribe for more investigations into the forces that forged our world. Our exploration of the Ice Age floods is immense, yet we have only traced the outline of its story. Consider the other planetary upheavals that must have guided our ancestors, volcanic winters that chilled the globe, or droughts that emptied entire regions. What ancient cataclysm do you believe most profoundly redirected the human story? Perhaps you have walked through a valley near your home, a place with strangely rounded boulders or a layer of unfamiliar soil, and wondered what forgotten deluge left its mark there. We are eager to hear your reflections and questions in the comments below, and to continue this discovery together with this thoughtful community. The Earth's history is an open book for those who know how to read its language. Until our next adventure, keep searching for the hidden stories written in the stones and streams around